Hello and greetings from the Isle of Skye. We've been here just over a week, and to say the least, the weather has been challenging. Scotland's currently going through one of the wettest springs on record, and we've had almost nothing but rain. But we'll have a look at some photos in a minute, but firstly, a couple of observations on what we've discovered so far. And firstly, despite the weather being pretty horrible, the Scottish people have been very friendly, very accommodating, and very helpful. And even travelling to Scotland in April as we are, we thought that this would be well outside the tourist season, but in fact there's a lot of people around everywhere you go, and the locals tell me that in the main season, June, July, it's absolutely bedlam. So if you're planning to go to somewhere like Scotland, maybe even consider going as early as March, because even in April there are a lot of people about. So what else have we discovered? Well, one of the most important things is doing a lot of planning for your trip. I've looked at a lot of photographs from the Isle of Skye online, and there are a number of really interesting locations. But sometimes the best photographic location is not the one that is obvious when you look at the tourist guides or the maps. Sometimes it's from a different place, and so it's worthwhile checking all of that out beforehand. And some of the locations that we've wanted to get to have proven to be very difficult to reach because of the amount of climbing, the rough terrain and other things, and I'll discuss that when we go through the photos shortly. And then as regards photographic equipment, what we've used, well, I've hardly used a tripod at all because the weather has been so challenging. The wind has been horrendous a lot of the time, and trying to set up a tripod in the pouring rain has really been difficult. So we haven't used that a great deal. What we have used is the 24 to 200 lens has done about 90% of our photographs so far. The wide angle lens, less than 10%, and the 100 to 400 zoom, so far I've only used it a couple of times, and that's about 1% of the total so far, but that might change later on. And a couple of other things. We've been using a magnetic filter system, which has proven to be very handy when you want to change filters quickly, such as putting on a polarizing filter or taking it off again as the weather changes. And having the magnetic filters are really handy. The only downside is that they do tend to sometimes come off as you pull your camera out of your camera bag. They can become dislodged, but overall that's been a really good benefit. So let's now have a look at some of the photographs that we've taken so far, and we'll put a few comments on those. So starting with a few more photos from Glencoe that I didn't include on the previous video. It again was raining and overcast for most of the time there, but there were still a few instances where there was an opportunity to get a decent photograph. These have all been minimally processed in Lightroom only, and these skies were as dramatic as they look. It was pretty wild weather. A couple of photographs here taken with the tripod at a place called Loch Etive, and a couple of these came out quite nicely, and with a bit more work will be quite acceptable. And then moving on towards Isle of Skye, we stopped at Eilean Donan Castle, and when we arrived there the rain was almost horizontal. We just about got blown away. And so we did the only sensible thing, and that was to retreat to the cafe for a hot cuppa and something to eat. And then by the time we came out, the rain had eased off to a light sprinkle, and we were able to go into the castle and make some photographs. Now at this time, my wife and I ended up swapping cameras inadvertently, so some of these photographs may have been taken by her, but I think we've managed to sort it out now. And so the castle is quite spectacular. Again, you can see the rain clouds passing through, wild weather and lots of rain and wind, but nonetheless it suits the atmosphere for the castle. And now moving on to Skye, this is probably my best photo so far, and it was taken by accident when I was trying to set the camera up on a tripod, but it shows the movement of the daffodils and the wind blowing, so I'm quite happy with that. But moving on, the first place we went to was the Old Man of Storr, which is a famous location on Skye, and I've seen lots of photographs from here, but what they don't tell you is that there's a horrendous climb from the car park up to approach the old man. And we spent about an hour trudging uphill in a very steep track, trying to reach a viewpoint where we could get a decent photograph of the old man. And after about an hour's climb, this is as close as we got, and then there was an even further climb, and again more steep, and a lot of people, as you can see, and that was to get you just a little bit closer to the old man. So after an hour of solid trudging in howling wind and rain, we decided that this was the viewpoint that was the best. And as you can see here, there's a storm cloud blowing through between the old man and the rest of the cliffs, and down here are a couple of intrepid photographers or tourists trying to find their way up to a higher viewpoint. But I was quite happy with that. It was incredibly difficult to climb up, and the weather conditions were really challenging. But then moving on a further day, we went to another castle. This is Dunvegan Castle down on the southern or the western part of Skye. And when we arrived there, it was raining quite heavily, but by the time we'd had a look through the castle and came outside, the weather cleared for a little while, so we were able to get some decent photographs. And then another location that the photographs that you think you're going to get would be to climb down this very steep track down and walk around, as you can see here on this track, to view the lighthouse at Neast Point. But in fact the best photograph is from up on the top of the cliffs, although because there'd been so much rain and so much bad weather, the track and the surroundings were completely waterlogged and muddy, and it took quite a while to find a location where we could get into the place where you could get a decent view of the lighthouse. This needs a little bit more work, but it does give you an idea of some of the locations. And this was just looking back the other direction from the lighthouse, and about 10 seconds after I took this photograph, we were hit by a hailstorm, and you can see here in the foreground there's a few raindrops already falling, but I managed to find a figure to stand in the foreground to photograph the spectacular cliffs. So again, challenging weather a lot of the time. And now on to the Quarang, which is another spectacular cliffs and outlook high in the mountains, but this time you can drive most of the way up there, and then there is a bit of a trek. But the most spectacular views are actually again from a bit further away. And on this day we were fortunate that there was a lot of sunshine, mild wind, and it almost felt warm. It was about 8 or 9 degrees, but without the wind chill it actually felt quite warm. And this is a spectacular formation or series of formations that are well worth a visit in good weather. And you can see from here that the location is spectacular. The sky was changeable, but we still got some great shots in. And of course, no visit to northern Scotland would be complete without visiting some of the old farmhouses. This is a museum, but shows the type of houses that were in use in the old days, and well worth a visit. And this day it had rained, but the sky had cleared momentarily. And finally, moving on to Elgold Beach, I'd seen a number of photographs from here, but what they didn't tell you is that to get to this point, it's a really rough climb over a lot of rounded pebbles on the beach and clambering over rocks just to get a photograph. But this is the one that I'm quite happy with. It shows the scale of the houses in the area and the mountains behind, which are almost completely bald and very rugged. So I was quite happy with that. And on the way back the sun was going down, and I managed to try and get a photograph here that depicted the housing and the living of the way the people live in this area. And this is actually 2 exposures blended together, but it's not ideal. It needs a bit more work. And finally, my last photograph from this is Kilkern Castle, which is a ruined castle on the northwest corner of Skye. And again, I knew the best photographic point was not climbing up to the castle itself, but climbing down onto a headland nearby and looking back up to it. It gives you a sense of the location, the isolation, and the sheer exposure of the place. So that's a brief summary of where we're at so far around Skye. Lots of challenges, and soon we move on to Lewis and Harris, and we'll see if we have some better weather over there. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you again soon.